Welcome back with me, Storm Huntley. I am now joined by lawyer Nick Freeman and journalist Nina Mishkoff, and here is what we're going to be discussing. So first up, should primary school pupils use gender-neutral terms for their teachers? Kids are being encouraged to use phrases like they and them, and even the title MX instead of Miss or Sir. Is this a good idea, or do you agree with critics who say that it's just confusing? After that, what do you make of pubs charging more for a pint after 10 p.m? It's in a bid to help fund more security staff, but is it unfair, or will it just encourage more people to drink faster before those prices go up? Then, should we ban under-16s from social media? It's something that the government ministers are considering. Is it a good idea to protect teenagers, or would it just make maybe some of them feel more isolated? After that, do we need to boost maternity pay to get women into work? Schools across England are ramping up maternity pay and offering flexible working in a bid to encourage more young women into teaching. Do you agree with that, or do you think it's just something we simply can't afford to do? And then, is it cruel to ban kids from weddings? An influencer has gone viral after ranting about people who have child-free policies. But is it okay to say that we just want adults only at our big day? You can give us a call on any of our topics. It's the same number, 0207 862 2222. I'll repeat, 0207 862 2222. Now, calls from landlines may cost up to 16 pence per minute plus any call set-up fees, and calls from mobiles may cost considerably more. But you can always send us a message. Head to Facebook or X, search for Storm Huntley, will pop up and you can leave your message there. All right, let's get into our first topic now. And should primary school pupils use gender-neutral terms for their teachers? Get your calls in for this one now. Kids are being encouraged to use phrases like they or them, and even the title MX, pronounced mix or mux, instead of Miss or Sir. This is regardless of the teacher's gender. Critics say that teachers shouldn't be bringing gender issues into the classroom and argue that it could just be confusing for children. But campaigners say that it's more about inclusivity. So what do you make of that at home, and what do my panel make? Nick, I'll start with you.
Well, I believe in inclusivity, and I think the simple solution is if somebody doesn't want to be identified as Miss or Sir, they say, look, I want to be a mux, or however you pronounce it, and they have a little badge there announcing how they want to be referred to, and then the pupils can refer to that particular person as mux or however they wish to be described. I think to start calling someone like myself, for example, a mux when I'm clearly a man and happy to be identified as a man, and I think the majority are quite happy to be identified as men or women, why would one deal with it in a way that really just satiates the tiny minority by arguably insulting them and removing their gender?
Well, that might be one option, Nina, but does that increase the questions that might be in a child's mind? If you're not going to do a universal title for everybody, it might start to ask questions as to why we've got Mrs. So-and-so and Mr. So-and-so and then mix so-and-so in the classroom.
Well, I think if we're talking about primary school children, they don't question that. Why would they? What is there for them to question? That's the name. It's Miss, Sir or mix. First of all, I thought this is just ridiculous, and why should people bother about it? But then I thought to myself, back in the day, there was only Mrs. or Miss. And then when I was growing up, Ms. came along. And I certainly wasn't married, and there's kind of connotations to being a miss, like which people would find hard to understand these days, like being a spinster, being left on the shelf. You were regarded as a kind of a secondary woman.
Wow. Because
you hadn't got a man. And
tell me, was Ms. a big deal when it came in?
Yes, it was. I embraced Ms. and I've always been Ms. since, and because I've never been married. So I'm very happy to be Ms. And in fact, I get quite cross if it's not a Ms. I found myself a subscription to the Times, and they've somehow got it in Mrs. And I got it, I felt quite cross about that. And I thought, well, this is ridiculous. So therefore, I understand if this is your identity, you want it to be your identity.
And correct. So you're both sort of in agreement there then. Both of you are saying that actually you would rather than use universal terms that are gender neutral for everybody, you would rather there will be the option of a Mr, a Miss and a mix.
Yes, I mean, what Nina's saying is there's no confusion about sexuality, whether it's a Miss or a Ms. When you're talking about them or the they, that there is then a question mark. Well, what does that mean? What is your sexuality? How do you sexually out? What's your gender? What's your gender?
I don't understand how referring to somebody as they questions their sexuality. I mean, we do often do it passingly anyway, don't we? We would say, Beyonce's coming to town, they'll be performing at the O2 whenever. We already use that term to refer to people.
Well, isn't that because she's bringing a band with them? Yeah. That's because it's a plural, it's a band. Yeah. They, for me, is plural.
Okay.
Them is plural. If you're talking about Beyonce, there's no question mark as far as her gender is concerned.
No, that's why I used her as an example.
So I think you're just using the collective expression, yes, she's coming and they're coming. They're bringing a whole massive team with them, aren't they?
It's only recently that it's become a gender term.
Yeah.
People specifically saying, I am not her, or I am not him, I am they. And that's only been in the last 5 years or so. Yeah. Before that, they was they as a term was always plural.
I think most men and women will be deeply insulted by being referred to, bearing in mind all their life they've been sir, miss, madam, whatever, to call them they.
So I wonder
because we're grown up with the they is a plural term. It doesn't make sense.
The criticism of this is that it is bringing the question of gender identity into pupils as young as primary school. I think there are 13 teachers or teaching assistants working in primary schools that don't identify as either male or female, and they're using the terms MX instead. And whether actually, if we universally call all the teachers by the same title, it takes those questions away slightly. We'd love to know what you feel. Carol from Sheffield, you're up first. What's your thoughts on this? Carol.
Hello.
Hi.
I think it denigrates teachers very much.
So what does?
A term that isn't miss, or because when I was at school, everyone was miss or sir, and you knew who you were talking to.
Okay, but we've moved on even from those times now. As Nina was saying, we've got Ms. now, and we have also, if you're married and you work in a school, you were, back in the day, I don't think you were allowed to teach. If you had got married, you'd have to leave your profession. So it was only a miss that would be teaching you. Whereas now, obviously, we have a lot of married teachers, they'd be misses, and people that don't want to be referred to as either miss or misses, so they're now Ms. So what's the problem with adding in another one, which is just mix? Isn't it language developing over time and we have to develop with it?
Yes, I agree with that. But I just go with what I was with when I was at school.
Yes, which is understandable. But now that we know that 13 primary school teachers that we know of and teaching assistants in primary school alone in England and Wales are identifying as MX, maybe we need to start thinking about it and changing things.
What does MX mean?
MX means you're not identifying as a Mr., a Mrs. or a Miss or a Ms.
Oh, I think it's ridiculous. Ridiculous.
For somebody that doesn't identify as either male or female, what would you like them to use?
Well, I think they should use a term for female or male.
But they don't identify as either. So your argument is that doesn't exist?
Oh, you've put me on the spot now.
It's a hard one. And it's, do you know what? It's hard to wrap your head around if you haven't really thought about it. I'm just trying to ask thought-provoking questions to really find out for viewers at home, not just yourself, how they feel about it and truly what they think. But Carol, thank you very much for your call. But if we have a situation at the moment where 13 teachers and teaching assistants, which is a small number, are identifying as MX, it's something that maybe we need to start thinking about and thinking about the language that we use, whether we're happy for everybody to just use MX to keep things simple and more inclusive as the argument goes. Michelle from Hampshire, what's your view on this?
Hi there. Yeah, I think that children in school should be calling teachers by their Christian names, which would solve all of this.
I mean, I have been to lots of different schools, and one of them we did call our teachers by their first name. It was a lot more informal. How do you feel about that, Nick?
Well, that's the way I think it's probably. What age are we talking about? Are you talking about primary school?
Primary school.
Yeah, primary school. Absolutely. I think that's fine.
They should call if you were a primary school teacher, they should just call you Nick.
That's fine. I'm quite happy with that. But I think when you go up to more senior school, you're not going to be calling your teachers by their Christian name.
Why not?
I think it's too familiar. I think there needs to be a level of respect. For me, I mean, look, I was brought up in a generation that I used to have to call, my father made me call all men at our golf club sir when I was 13. I had to call, and I said, Dad, can't I just call them Mr. Smith? Or no, you call them sir. So, I'm not suggesting that's the right approach, but I think when you call a teacher sir, you're establishing a sort of a level of respect.
So why would we not establish that in primary school then? That's the bit, because you differentiate between the two.
I think
because then after high school as well, you go into a workplace and you refer to your boss by their first name.
Well, normally what happens is, you know, even at my age, you know, you might say to, so if I speak to a client, I might say, you know, good afternoon, Mr. Smith, how can I help you? And he'll say, no, call me Darren. And often people will indicate how they want to be referred to. And I think that's quite healthy. But I think the starting point, the default position, is to have a level of respect for who you're communicating with.
But I don't think you have less respect for someone if you call them by their Christian name. I mean, sure, the sort of the respect is from comes from the school regulation and the attitude.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like saying, in fact, friends of ours, in a completely different aspect, their children call them by their first name. You think, oh my God, that's dreadful. They should call them mum and dad, or mother and father, or outside the home they refer to as mum. But you know, Peggy and Tim, and we call them Peggy and Tim, and there was no less respect for them as parents or adults, and it was somehow. I much preferred that.
Michelle, what about Nick's argument, though? And many people at home will be saying the same thing. It's just too informal.
I believe we get the best out of children by meeting them on their level, and they call each other by their Christian names. So why not teachers?
Well, I suppose because teachers are already struggling with discipline in schools, and so maybe it would help for them to hold a little bit of authority when they're teaching a class, particularly secondary, perhaps.
That can all be established, leaving names aside. I'm a teacher myself. I'm also a foster carer of long time, and there are lots of better ways than insisting on somebody is called a certain thing. It's
very interesting, and also it would completely take away this issue of what prefix to put, what pronoun to put in front of a second name. Michelle, thank you very much for your call. Lucinda from Hampshire, you're up next. What do you think about calling all teachers Mix Smith, Mix whatever?
Yeah, so I think there was a point just made around they always being plural, and I think there's a common story that you use for seminars and other things in which you basically say, you know, a father and son got into a car accident, and when they arrived at the hospital, the doctor said, "Oh, I can't work on them. I can't help them out." And they said, "Why could that be?" And the old joke is, "Oh, well, because it's a woman, and no one would assume that it was a female doctor. You just assume it's a male doctor." And so they would go down all these stories of, well, okay, maybe they're a gay couple, and they try and find other reasons, rather than just thinking, oh, it could be a woman. And I think they is very commonly used and has been for centuries in a singular context. If you're walking down the road and you say, "Oh, someone just passed me an apple," and someone else might reply, "Oh, did they?"
So
that's a singular usage.
I appreciate that response, and I felt the same. So I was quite surprised when you very much feel like it's only used in a plural term, because I think I use it quite commonly to identify an individual in passing after I've identified even their gender previously.
But that's direct, isn't it? What you're talking about there is a situation where you're referring to someone not in their presence. You're referring to someone who's not with you. To call me they.
Well, I could say to Nina right now, Nick believes that. No, I would have to say. Well, they believe that it's too informal to refer to a teacher by their first name.
And I'd say, not they, it's either Nick or it's me or it's him.
But that's the whole point of it.
I understand.
We are moving towards a society where, because of inclusivity and wanting people to feel that they are part of society and not other, that we're moving towards that. So you look at Sam Smith, for instance, if you take him as an example.
Or they. You would take them as an example.
Take them as an example. We're all having to learn rather slowly what you call them. But the thing is, if we are moving towards that sort of society, that in a while, it's not going to matter what we think, because the people who are now using those terms, and say in their 20s or 30s, quite easily and normally, they are the ones who will be moving it all forward. So that primary school children, it will be part of normal.
And it is, you see it already.
Yes,
Younger
exactly.
people are far more fluent in this sort of conversation.
Exactly.
I hear friends of mine whose children are constantly correcting them in the right sort of language, and rightfully so. And it just takes a little bit of practice. And as Nina's demonstrated, sometimes it can be quite hard to wrap your head around.
But
it's
not inclusive. You're including a tiny minority and excluding the vast majority. So how is that inclusive?
But the term they and them can be used both male and female, so you're not excluding anybody.
Well, I would feel excluded. And
well, that's very...
And I would absolutely feel...
Okay.
And I can't think of any of my pals who you refer to as them when it's a he or a she would think, what are you talking about?
All right. Thank you very much for your call. Jean from London, what's your view when it comes to referring to teachers as mucks or mix?
Well, what's my opinion on it? I think it's absolutely ridiculous. I'm a Miss Aldred of this parish, spinster of this parish, and I don't care whether people think that's old-fashioned, out of date, not with it or anything else. I'm not a muzz with a buzz at the end like a bumblebee, a muzz. I'm a Miss.
Okay, but...
Never married, never had children, and if people find that objectionable or unpleasant, that's up to them.
No, nobody's finding that, Jean. Nobody's attacking your right to identify in the way that you like.
It feels like that anybody who's a definite, either definite male or definite female is becoming the minority, and everybody else. Are you sure you're a boy? Are you sure you're a girl? That you like to wear dresses? Well, maybe some boys do like to wear dresses and play with dolls when they're children, and they grow out of it and become a firefighter.
That absolutely happens too, Jean. But it's interesting that you picked up on the Ms and then put a Z at the end, because actually Nina likes to identify as a Ms, which does have a sort of buzz at the end of it.
I love the bumblebee bit. I love the bumblebee.
And so we all have different preferences. I suppose, Jean, the question is, if we accept that we have 13 individuals teaching in primary schools who don't identify as either male or female, how would you like them to be referred to by children in their class?
Well, I mean, if they're more male than female, then it would be referred to them as he. But if they're more female than male, it would be
But Jean, they just don't identify with either... They don't identify with either gender, so the gender titles don't work for them. So we have to come up with something.
How many genders are we going to end up with?
Well, listen, I mean, I believe there's quite a few, and I am not. I can't have that discussion because I am not privy to all of them. There are far more than I could identify. But maybe this is something that we all need to get used to. But it sounds like a lot of people would be seriously putting the brakes on. And nobody's called up in preference of using mix for everyone. That seems to be off the cards.
No, just let the ones who want to be mixed, let them be mixed.
And if
Jean wants to be mixed, it's a simple solution.
Absolutely
fine.
It's
a simple solution, and let the others who are quite happy with their identity just be referred to in the way that we already do so.
And isn't it funny how generationally what we identify in different pronouns changes? As in, when you were growing up, Miss was rather you'd been left on the hay bale or you'd been left behind, and you're.
Well, the hay bale sounds rather exciting.
I don't know. I didn't mean it.
Wishful thinking.
I left on the shelf, but for me, losing my Miss and becoming a Mrs. was like, oh no, I'm old now.
Yeah, but it's not making a difference to your gender, is it?
No, it was just what I'm just talking about is how we feel about different titles.
Exactly.
It's different for everyone in every generation.
But it's all consistent with your progression as a woman. That we're talking now about.
Oh, hold on. That's a whole other debate to have. I think we've just fallen foul of something else.
Okay.
Okay,
progressing from Miss to Mrs. That's
Yeah.
Is it progress? I ask myself.
Oh, well, that's a different argument.
Jean, thank you very much for your call. Now, don't forget, later we're asking if it's cruel to ban kids from weddings. How do you feel about children at big days, celebrations like weddings? One influencer has gone viral talking about child-free policies at weddings. But is it just fair enough if it's your big day to make that call? But now we'd love your calls on pubs, and particularly them charging more for pints after 10 p.m. 0207 862 2222 is the number to get in touch. Right, I have a beer here, not that we've not seen one of these before. I'm going to fill it up because I was a little bit worried that it was going to look a bit stale by the time we got to speaking about this. OK, worst poured pint in absolute history. Let's see how far this goes. Wouldn't do that.
No,
if it was
it's not champagne, is it?
a bartender, I can tell you that. No, it certainly isn't. I also just poured it very badly. All right, so we're talking, you've gone to the pub, maybe after work, and you've ordered a pint here, and you're charged £7.40, which is scandalous as is. And then you've stayed there a little while longer, friends have joined in, and now if you're at the O'Neill's pub that is in the papers today, after 10 p.m, it's £9.40p. That is £2 extra just because you have been enjoying your friend's company for a couple of hours, and you've now clicked over the curfew. So it's not just a pint that this is happening to either in this pub. It's all the drinks are subject to surge prices. Bottles and soft drinks are also included. There's actually a sign on the bar that says we operate variable price lists in this venue. I'm not sure anybody would really know what that meant if they went to the bar. This is in a bid, though, the company says, to pay for more security staff in the evening. So is it fair enough? Or will it just encourage people to drink much faster and avoid this 10 p.m? I keep calling it a curfew. It's not really a curfew, but it's just 10 p.m. surcharge. Nina, what do you think?
Pubs can charge what they like, I suppose, but then are people going to pay it? You have to ask yourself why they're doing it. Are they doing it to prevent drunkenness? Well, that's not going to work at all, because people are going to order at 10 to 10. They're going to order a table full of pints. Is it to just to get more profits to pay for the security staff? Pubs are going through a hard time. But it seems to me, I mean, I don't drink pints. £7.40 seems to be very expensive anyway, and £9.40 is ludicrous. And the trouble is, I think people just, unless all pubs are doing it, they're just going to go on to the next pub, aren't they? So it seems to be a completely counter-effective thing. Also, people are used to, say, like the happy hour. Between 5 and 7, you arrive at 7:05, you don't get a half-price cocktail. So maybe that will work one way. But I think it's ridiculous. They just won't get people staying.
A lot of people are calling this the unhappy hour. Nick, do you agree?
I think it's commercial suicide. I also think that actually it's probably a breach of their regulations. The sign, the licensing, the sign is apparently at the side of the bar. Signs and prices need to be displayed in a very clearly visible manner. And as this is something apparently new, they have to make it absolutely plain to all their customers that at 10 o'clock, switch off time, we're going to charge another couple of quid for a pint. And I think what will happen is it will actually lead to trouble, because I think people will be saying, right, it's 5 to 10, I want 5 pints, please, at the old price, at the reasonable price.
And they'll just sit and let it go stale.
Can you imagine? We get to, it's 10 o'clock, come on, you're not giving me those quickly enough. And then it's going to kick off. So I just don't think any good will come from this at all. And I think they're in breach of the regulations, the licensing regulations, and in fact, they're going to get into trouble about it.
Well, I mean, perhaps you're the lawyer, so I bow to your...
Not a licensing lawyer.
But bow to your knowledge in that way. Perhaps. Yeah. I do wonder, though, whether this might actually be fairer, and the reason I say that it is fairer is because the hospitality industry has been under a tremendous amount of pressure since COVID, and since then we've had a cost of living crisis, we've seen fuel prices gone up, they now have extra national insurance to pay for their staff members, they've been clobbered by that, increase in minimum wage, lots of things are happening to make it a real struggle for bars. I know they've had 1 pence off of draft beers, but clearly not making a big enough impact to stop these sorts of solutions. But their only alternative is actually to just put beer prices up across the board. This now gives you the opportunity to choose and get a cheaper pint earlier on in the day if you can't afford to go out and pay those kind of prices.
But I haven't seen the latest profits from this particular pub outlet. It's Mitchell's, isn't it? Mitchell's. They're the holding company.
That owns the whole company.
So I suspect that this is about profit, and I'm not sure that this particular organisation is actually struggling. I think they just want to make more profit. I think there's a huge difference here between this massive organisation and the small pubs that are genuinely struggling. I'm not aware that this particular organisation is struggling. I think they just want to make more dosh.
Well, we did have a spokesperson, I'm going to come back to you in a minute, Nina, but a spokesperson from Mitchells and Butler who operate this pub that say the dynamic price varies by site and it helps to cover additional costs at the times when door security is needed. I mean, fair enough, no, Nina?
You know, perhaps they're also hoping that by 10 o'clock people are so drunk they don't notice, you know, what they're paying. There is that. But, you know, in Australia, in the 70s, pubs used to shut at 6 o'clock at night so that to force men to go home to their wives for dinner rather than just drinking.
Good idea.
Well, it is a good idea, isn't it? It's a healthy
I'm not
idea.
sure.
I think it's a healthy idea.
Part of their argument may be that it actually stops binge drinking. It stops people from, as they progress closer to closing time, just absolutely chugging back.
This encouraged the 6 o'clock swill, which is about 5:45. They'd order as many pints as they could and then swill it all down. But, you know, pubs used to be shut in the afternoons here, you know. So that things have changed radically from the way they used to be.
And we don't have this problem, do we? We have a lot of drunk people in this country. There's a huge drinking culture. You know, when you travel in Europe, you don't tend to see, you know, certainly in France and Italy, you don't see that, and the bars and they're open all the time. You don't see drunken people.
There does seem to be a slightly different culture. I think there's probably a lot of things involved in creating that. Kevin from North Yorkshire, how would you feel if you went to a pub and you bought a round of drinks at 8 o'clock and then went back up after 10 and it had doubled in price?
Well, I think it's a great idea, to be honest, because I have to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and often I've stopped after 10 o'clock, and when I wake up in the morning think, oh, I should have gone home at 10 o'clock. And so the hiking prices maybe make me go home earlier and get up better in the morning. So I think it's a great idea, to be honest.
You actually agree with the prospect that it could stop binge drinking and stop people over drinking? I mean, if you've left work at 5, 6 o'clock and you're still in the pub by 10, you've been there a considerable amount of time. There's an argument to say you've had your fair share. It is, in fact, time to go home.
Exactly, yeah.
Kevin, are you not saying you'd actually drink less as a consequence of this?
I would, yes, because by the time you get to 10 o'clock, you've had a 2 or 3.
Yeah, sure.
You always feel like another, and I think, I'm not paying that price. I'll go home to bed so I get up early in the morning and feel better.
You're from Yorkshire, aren't you, Kevin?
What are you implying?
Nothing.
There's certainly a cut-off point if prices go up by that amount, because it is considerable. And it also goes up in soft drinks as well. So it isn't just the pints, it's soft drinks, it's everything. Although slightly less, I think, on soft drinks. Kevin, thank you very much for your call. Edward from Kent, what's your view on this surcharge? Do you think this is a fair of establishments? I mean, this is just one specific pub in London, but this could be something.
Well, I mean, whoever brainchild brought this up, I think it's ludicrous, to be honest with you, because the country is such of a state that, I mean, like I said to the girl, I go to town on a Saturday, have 2 pints, maybe 3, that's like a few pounds, but I'm not going to stay in pub all day. I didn't go to a pub where they're going to charge me £10 a pint. I couldn't afford it because I'm a pensioner. I couldn't afford it. People can't afford it.
Well, this is my argument. First of all, it sounds like you don't need to go out. There's a party in your house right there. But second of all, my argument is here, if I'm going to have to back them up, that the alternative is that the price of pints go up for all times of the day, maybe by a lesser amount, but it will certainly go up. This way, Edward, this saves you, because you can go into the pub and get a much cheaper, or a price that you expect, that you're seeing at the moment now, before 10 o'clock. You can leave before 10 o'clock, and then you'll never have to see the prices go up to £9.40.
Yeah. But be honest with you, if I went to the pub, say, for argument's sake, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then leave at 7 o'clock, I tell you, I couldn't find my way home. I'd be on my back. But people can drink, like, till tomorrow. Well, if you go to the pub with my 6 or 8 mates and it's £10 a pint, that's £40 or £50 around. The pubs are going to close. The people won't, because you say, that pub charge £10 a pint. Because that's why I go to Maidstone, where I live, that the certain pubs are certain prices, and I go to the cheapest pub to have the cheapest price. I would never pay £10 for a pint, £3 if I'm lucky. And that is nice.
Edward, whether this would only work in London or other major cities, because I tell you what, a round of £40 and £50 isn't that unusual in London. And when I came down here, that was one of the big things that I had to get used to. You're thinking, I have to remortgage in order just to pay for this round.
Particularly
Edward,
the last one.
Exactly. Edward, thank you very much for your call. Thanks for all your calls on this. We have to take a quick break now, but in a moment we're going to be asking if we should ban under 16s from using social media. Maybe you have a teenager and think this would be a great idea. Or do you think it would make them feel slightly more isolated? Maybe they have their social life online away from school. I'd love to hear from you either way. 0207 862 2222 is the number, and we'll see you after this. Not just any hamper though, he wants it to be like a food hamper, you know, like one of those fancy ones. Well, I don't know, he didn't mention a brand, but basically various food items would be buried along with him. I don't know, in case he get peckish, I'm not sure. Welcome back, we are live on Channel 5, also live on My 5. Nick and Nina still here with me. Don't forget, later we're going to be asking if we should boost maternity pay to get women into work. Schools across England are doing this to encourage young women into the sector. Is it a good idea? Do you think we can afford it? But first, we're asking if we should ban under 16s from social media. I would love to hear your views on this. 0207 862 2222. Now, government ministers are thinking about doing just this. It would see us follow Australia, whose government has just announced that children under the age of 16 can no longer use Facebook, Instagram, X, or TikTok unless they have consent from their parents. Now, the Prime Minister has previously spoken against banning phones for young teenagers. And even on this show, we've heard concerns from parents who say that children need their phones so that they can be in contact. But what about social media? Would banning it be a good idea, or is it just going to leave some teenagers feeling a little isolated? Nick?
I think an outright ban is the wrong thing, but I think very heavily regulated, and there's a lot of regulation already there, is the way forward.
What do you mean heavily regulated?
Well, I don't think they should have access to certain material that is not going to do them any good. So,
are we talking about extreme violence, pornography,
self-harm, all sorts of those sort of things should be protected from. But ultimately, isn't it a matter for parents and for the schools to decide and regulate what they watch and what they don't watch, and just be on it? You know, shouldn't parents be on it all the time?
But we don't say that about other things. We know endanger children's seatbelts, for example. We don't say, well, we should leave parents to decide whether a child should wear a seatbelt or not.
Well, the law's in place in relation
to
that.
This is what I'm getting at, is that there are times where the government steps in and says, do you know what, we're not going to give you the option here. We actually think for anyone under the age of 16, social media is detrimental to their mental health, and we're going to take away that ability for you to let them have access to it.
It's an integral part of the fabric of their social life. That's the problem, isn't it, as we exist? And that's why I say it needs to be controlled, and you need to look at it very carefully. And there will come a point where, when they're, say, 16 in a day, when they're all of a sudden they've got social media, they're not going to learn. They're going to saturate themselves with it, aren't they? They're going to literally just, wow, now I can do this, and they're suddenly exposed to everything that they've not had to have carefully regulated in the past. So, I just think a lot of control and a lot of involvement from the schools and from parents, and parents need to, ultimately, it's the responsibility of parents. But otherwise, they're going to be paying catch up. And there is going to come a point where they are going to be allowed to use it. And I think, therefore, it's important they start at an early age.
Perhaps this is a really old-fashioned way of looking at things, Nina, actually, because for young people, as Nick said, their social life is online. Everything is online. And as far as accessing detrimental material, well, you don't have to go on social media to find that. And the internet has it. So if you have a computer at home, unfortunately, your child, whatever age they are, potentially has access to it.
The trouble is, Pandora's box has been opened, and how do you close it?
You can't.
And I think that Australia has the right idea, because just comparing how life was for young people some decades ago, because I'm old enough, I can do that. And I used to be the editor of a teenage magazine back in the 70s, so I know something of of those young minds.
The teenage world.
Yeah, the teenage world, and how impressionable young people are, how prey they are to bullying, to influence, the wrong influences. And in those days, you know, for the thought of a child, a young person, say a 12-year-old boy, being able to go through a doorway and watch a live sex act, or violence would be, you know, how would they do that? They couldn't do that. But now we've just let all the gates open, all the doors are open.
But hold on, that would be an argument to not let anybody under the age of 16 use the internet.
No, I understand that, but there should be some regulation also for what young people can see and can't see or should be exposed to.
There's the online safety bill.
You say that online safety bill, but how effective is it? Look at the terrible effect that porn has had on young boys and therefore on young girls. It's shocking. The bullying that goes on. As you said, the self-harm chat rooms. I firmly believe that they should be protected from them. It's completely.
So you would go for a ban then?
I would go for a ban. And
how would you enforce it? How would you enforce it?
But you say parents do it. But parents are on social media, so they don't see the harm.
No.
They can't say you can't do it when they do it themselves.
Well, but you have a great point. How do you enforce it? Because already
how do you police
we've got a limit. You're not allowed to be on social media if you're on most social media sites if you're under 13. But we know 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds are on there.
Well, then how are Australia banning it? Let's find out how they do it.
Well, let's see how it works. But shouldn't we place much more responsibility on the platforms that have these things? Number one,
they have
with massive fines, massive. I mean, millions and millions if they breach it. So they get their act together. And there are a lot of adults who have untold damage done to them because of social media. There are various sites, and you know they're not 16. They might be 26, 36, 46, and it's ruining their lives.
Absolutely,
Instagram.
That would be an argument to say ban it until under 18s because adults can't even use it appropriately.
My point is, if you allow them at a young age, when the brain is fairly malleable, they learn to navigate and understand it and deal with it in a way that's commensurate for their welfare.
Deal with things. They shouldn't have to deal with things. They should. And the fact of the matter is, we've gone too far into young people's social lives are all online, so that they are becoming less and less capable or confident about having relationships.
But maybe in the future they won't need to. I know it is a completely alien concept to us, but we are living in an increasingly globalised world. Maybe they're going to spend more time, you know, sitting in their room in Manchester talking to somebody in Rio than they are to their neighbour.
But you say talking. Say talking.
They can't
what you mean is texting.
Well, no, you can talk on FaceTime. You can talk on Skype and
that's
Teams.
true.
But they're less and less able to even talk on the phone.
Okay.
You know, or to make any kind of meaningful
proper interaction.
Exactly.
Interactions.
Okay, and Annika from Gloucestershire, sorry, I just want to get some calls in on this. I believe you're a teacher and a parent. What's your view when it comes to social media and its impact on young people?
Hi there. Apologies, I got a bit of a sore throat. Basically, it's a really difficult one, but I would ban it. There are children coming into schools with speech and language issues. There are children coming into schools with mental health issues. And a lot of it is linked to social media. They're spending all day, every day on their phones. They aren't getting outside. They aren't actually conversing with human beings. And it's really, really sad to see. Well, and I think if you need to look after your children and you need to monitor where your children are, you can do that through a smartwatch, or you can have a phone that doesn't have access to social media.
They also have little trackers. My dog has one. There's lots of different ways of doing it. I appreciate that, Annika. I suppose there's a couple of big questions if we're going to ban social media for the under 16s. The first and the biggest one is one Nick's brought up. How do you do that? How do we go about shutting the barn door when the horse is already bolted? I mean, first of all, you're asking those that are 15 now to go cold turkey off social media, which is going to have its own implications on how they sort of manage that. But also, we have a limit at 13 and we know people younger than that are using it at the moment. How are you going to curb it at 16?
Honestly, I don't know. I haven't done the research on it. It would be really interesting to see how Australia do it. But I think we need to look into how we get social media companies to adhere to that. We need to do it for the children's sake. You know, I've seen 9, 10, 11-year-olds on pornography sites. It's not right. You know, I don't know how we would do it. I don't know if we would need to implement it sort of a little bit like they wanted to implement the smoking ban, where we do it sort of yearly.
Age by age?
The age would go up.
Okay, that's a suggestion. My other quick question for you, Annika, as a teacher, because I think you've got a real insight there into children's minds. There will be a few children that feel isolated in their classroom around their peers that are directly in front of them, but they might find a gateway to a social life through social media. They might find their tribe, as people like to call it, more like-minded children online. It would be really detrimental to those children, would it not?
I believe that it would be more detrimental to them in terms of bullying and things like that online. I think children, if they have access to sports clubs or if they have access to things like cadets, things that they can go out and they can actually meet their tribe out in the real world. I grew up in a household where I was a young carer. I didn't have a tribe at school at all, but I went into cadets and I found my tribe, and I found my husband there, and I married my husband and have kids and so on and so forth. And I found my tribe not in school, not through social media.
So you would rather they did that
through meeting people,
the old-fashioned way, face-to-face through clubs and things. Annika, thank you very much for your call. Claude from London, how do you feel about an outright ban for under 16s using social media?
I'm in disagreement, and the reason why I'm in disagreement of the ban is I think it's going to curb the creativity of 16-year-olds. They really are beneficial from the creative elements of enhancing their creative abilities on social media. I do understand the elements of old kind of, socialization. However, social media is not really the finger to be pointing at. We've got systematic issues.
What do you mean by creativity? Yeah, sorry, Nina.
I was going to ask, Claude, what do you mean by would curb their creativity? What particular creative aspect comes to them from social media?
Well, being able to meet other communities of their own age, being able to use creative tools like Canva and like those elements of kind of creative tools. You know, we're going into an age now where there are like modern creative tools of kind of creativity and kind of communication and those kind of elements.
I understand where you're coming from with things like Canva, Photoshop, Final Cut Pro, editing software, all of that stuff. The technology is incredible now, but we're not talking about banning under 16s from using technology. We're talking about banning under 16s from using social media. So I don't know what element of on social media, on platforms like Instagram, X, TikTok would hamper their creativity.
Well, from the moment we ban those social media and from accessing social media, we're also entertaining the banning from Canva and social media tools like Photoshop. And what concerns me is that we're not looking at that systematic issues like social injustice. For example, I got 2 younger sisters who are not safe at the moment, who were taken into care unlawfully, and there are big systematic racial issues at the moment which we really need to look at than exactly pointing the finger at social media.
Okay, Claude, I think we're veering into different territory there, and I just don't want to get into any legal issues. That's obviously an ongoing case. But Claude, thank you very much for your call. Pauline from Birmingham, when it comes to social media, do you think that it would be detrimental to have an outright ban for under 16s?
It would be detrimental if we don't.
Why is that?
Because, for instance, example, I've got a 11-year-old grandson who's just started senior school. Now, his parents don't agree with him having internet at the moment, which I agree as well. He shouldn't have it. Anyway, since he started senior school, he feels out of place because the majority, not all of his friends, have got social media on their phone. So now he feels like he's the odd one out because he hasn't got social media on his phone.
So that's a good thing to bring to Nick, who you would disagree with an outright ban, but an outright ban does help parents come together in groupthink, because as Pauline's saying, if you've only got one parent that's deciding, absolutely not, you're not having social media, you're not having a smartphone, then it leaves that child out from all the other conversations that's going on.
Well, my view is parents should police it. It's simple, and you say to your child, right, I want to know what you're doing, but you're using your phone, your social media, say for an hour a day, and that's it, between 6 and 7 o'clock, and then I can, and the rest of the time it's a ban, and that's the way you police it and enforce it.
So parents just need to get better, Pauline?
Because otherwise it's just going to happen, isn't it?
It's an idealised situation, but in practical terms, I don't think that happens. As I said, because parents use social media themselves, it's very much harder for them to police their children, because it's very hard to say you can't use it when you use it.
Well, that is a whole other discussion, actually. Just our own
do as I say, not as I do.
Social media influencing our children's. Unfortunately, we've run out of time talking about this. But Pauline, thank you very much for your call and theory there. We want your calls on this now. Should we boost maternity pay to encourage women into work? I'll remind you of the number there. It's 0207 862 2222. Schools across England are ramping up maternity pay and offering more flexible working in a bid to stem the exodus of young women from teaching. Head teachers and charities say more than 9,000 women between the ages of 30 and 39 left state education last year, with experts citing lagging excessive workloads and maternity pay as the key factors. Now, it's not exclusive to education, with research showing that a quarter of women across all sectors have been forced to quit work to accommodate childcare. So, do we actually need to take action in order to keep women in the workplace? 0207 862 2222 is the number for your thoughts and views on this one. Nina, what do you think when it comes to maternity pay? Kimmy Badenoch famously said it's gone far enough.
Oh gosh, horrendous, absolutely horrendous. And she backtracked on it, but you knew that's what she really meant. Of course, maternity pay should be boosted. It's always fallen to women. You know, women take the most of the load when it comes to having children, and will continue to do so until men step up a bit more. And there's always been this schism between a woman wanting to have a family and to have a career, and we sort of managed that, a kind of a balance with women more pressure over the last few decades. But now it seems to me that if you're a school teacher, there are so many more pressures on you, because parenting has actually not been what it should be. There are children coming to school who are not potty trained, who can't use cutlery, who are unable to converse, because there are certain parents who have failed their children in this aspect. So it's always the school teachers that have to take up the slack. So the pressures of that, combined with the fact that if you are pregnant, our level of maternity pay is really not what it should be. You compare the rest of the world, and childcare is horrendous. The cost of childcare, I don't know how anybody manages. I really don't.
Well, we do have a declining birth rate. And there are obviously reasons for that. So perhaps this would be a good way to encourage people to have more children and stay in work.
Is that the real problem? I mean, we're talking about teachers, aren't we? And teachers are very lucky to the extent that they have far, far more holiday than anybody else.
Don't start that. They need those holidays, and they work a lot of those holidays.
Wait a minute.
I've just heard the phone lines light up with a very angry teacher.
Well, I'm sure there are, but there are lots of people who work really, really hard. Look, the first point is, in an idealistic world, it may be a lovely thing to give everybody whatever they want, but how do we afford it as a society? It's unaffordable. Well, and, you know, when you have a small business, you know, I employ half my staff are women, OK? And if a woman gets pregnant, if one of my staff gets pregnant, as has happened in the past, I pay them the full whack for the whole 9 months. That's what I do.
But you're very rare, because that's not what the teachers are
What do
getting.
you mean for the full 9 months? Because they're allowed to take a full year.
Yeah, they're okay, but they are, after the birth, they tend to come back. After
the child is a year, they tend to come back.
Yeah, after they normally have about 9 months or a year off. I mean, and they will say, I'm going to do some work from home. So they want to do some work. And what I would say is, how many self-employed women do you know who actually say, yeah, I'd like to take a year off? Because I know that certainly partners in the law practices that I've worked in the past, I mean, one in particular, she had a baby, she worked right to the birth, she then had the baby, brought it in literally 2 days later in a cot and carried on. I'm not suggesting that's the right approach. There should be a level of support. There is a massive level of support. A woman can have up to a year, as you rightly say, off without that interfering
but not the
adversely.
financial backing that they get in other countries.
Well, yeah, but other countries don't give them the time, do they?
They do give them the time.
Well, there's let's clear this up. Let's look at how much statutory maternity pay currently is in the UK. So it's paid for up to 39 weeks. This is statutory
90%.
Maternity pay, although you can take a full year off. So the first 6 weeks, you get 90% of your average weekly earnings. Then that falls to the lowest of either £184 per week or 90% of your average weekly earnings, and that's for 33 weeks. Now, how does the UK maternity pay compare to other countries? Well, when it comes to overall pay, the UK sits rather lower down, further towards the bottom of the pack, but it's near the top when we measure against the length of paid time women have the legal right to take off. Now, in France, Germany and Turkey, for example, the government pays women their full salary for between 14 and 24 weeks. In the US, it offers 0 federal statutory maternity pay, but some states, such as California, offer up to 8 weeks paid family leave, about 2/3 of their earning, just 2/3 of that. And family leave, I'm interested to know what that means, whether it's both the mother and the father taking that time off or whether they split that. So yes, we get quite a long time that we're allowed to take off, but financially, we don't get the money in our back pocket.
Isn't a problem, if we give more money, are employers going to say, look, it's really expensive to employ women?
Well, this is
and aren't they then going to say, look, I'm going to shift, which obviously is discriminatory, but you're forcing the hand because business ultimately needs to make money.
OK, well, on that note, let's now speak to Jolie Brearley from the charity Pregnant Then Screwed. Welcome, Jolie. Thank you very much for joining us. You would welcome a boost to maternity pay. Now, is that in order to get women into the workplace, or are there other reasons?
Well, there's a mix of reasons. We know that if you increase maternity pay, then you improve retention rates and productivity of staff. We also know that because maternity pay is paid at such a low rate, that 4 in 10 women are returning to work after just 12 weeks of maternity leave, which frankly isn't enough. And we also know that 3/4 of families are starting their new life in debt because maternity pay is so low, it's less than half of the national living wage, and nobody can live on that amount of money. So they end up using credit cards and getting themselves into debt in order to survive maternity leave. And that's obviously not a great way to start your life as a new family. So for many reasons, we think the maternity pay needs to increase.
What about Nick's argument here that says, you know, if you are a small employer, a small business, and you're already struggling, you might be less likely to employ a woman of childbearing years because you're thinking, oh, this could be a year's worth of me having to fork out.
Yeah, I mean, that happens. We know that happens. And we know that about 40% of employers say that they will not employ women of childbearing age because they are worried about the burden that will have on their business. Yet we know from employers who have managed maternity leave and managed women on maternity leave that actually they would then employ more women who were going to have children because they realised that actually it's not as hard as they thought it was in the first place. What we need to do really to redress the balance is increase paternity pay as well. We have the lowest rate of paternity pay in Europe. You get just 2 weeks at £182 a week. And 1 in 4 dads don't even take that because they can't afford to do so. Until we increase paternity leave, then of course the the joy, but also the burden of childcare will always fall to women, and that means that they will be judged in the interview room. So we need to level the playing field in terms of parental leave pay, but we also need to increase it so that parents can actually take that time out of work to care for their children.
Part of what the head teachers are doing here is also increasing flexible working. I'm wondering whether to negate Nick's worries that people will stop employing women of childbearing years, actually flexible working is a good compromise and maybe a better way of dealing with this issue, particularly a retention issue after your baby's been born.
Yeah, I mean, parental leave is not a silver bullet. There are lots of problems here. There is flexible working, and we at Pregnant Then Screwed, our phones ring off the hook from teachers because they simply cannot get flexible working. They often find that their head teachers are really reluctant to offer them job shares, or, you know, of course, you have to be at school between school hours in order to teach the children. And so there's very little flexibility. And when you have your own child, which the majority of teachers do, being able to manage your personal and professional obligations becomes really, really challenging. And that's why we see so many women giving up work as teachers and leaving the workforce. So flexible working is crucial and absolutely is possible. I think there's a lot of teachers that sort of computer says no, and they don't really think about some of the options that are available in schools, but also childcare, as you have spoken about. We have one of the most expensive childcare systems in the world, and it's really hard to get a childcare place. So until we're able to fix our childcare system so that teachers and other employees can get affordable, accessible, high quality childcare, then again, it will be women making these career sacrifices in order to care for their children and not have to spend the extortionate amounts of money that they need so that somebody can care for their child, so that they can work and contribute to the labour market.
Julie, sorry, I'm running to a break now, so I'm going to have to say goodbye to you. But Julie Bradley, thank you very much for joining us for the first half of this conversation. We are going to continue after the break, but we do have to take that. So stay with us. We'll be hearing from you in just a moment. Should we raise maternity pay in order to encourage people into work? You heard from Julie there that actually it could increase retention. 0207 862 2222 is the number for your view, and we'll speak to you right after this. We could adopt that word here. We have quite a bit of Dunkelflauter in the UK. Welcome back. We are live on Channel 5, also live on My 5. Nick and Nina are still here with me. Now, later, is it cruel to ban kids from weddings? An influencer has gone viral for making fun of people who have child-free weddings. I don't know why that's in inverted commas, but there you go. But is it fair enough to say only adults on your big day? But now, should we boost maternity pay to encourage women back into work? 0207 862 2222. We'll speak to you in just a moment. Schools across England are putting up maternity pay to encourage more younger women into the profession. Do you think this is the right idea? Now, we heard from Jolie from Pregnant Then Screwed just before the break. She was saying that maternity pay increases would be welcome and actually could increase retention after the baby is born, so encourage women back to work post-baby. What's your reaction to what she had to say?
I think Jolie spoke a lot of sense. She also talked about paternity pay. These are great ideas. The big problem is who's going to pay for it? Where's the money coming from?
Well, the taxpayer. I mean,
But when you say the taxpayer, we owe trillions in reality, and there isn't the surplus there. We just haven't got it. And the other problem is this. It's great to encourage people back to work, but there are certain businesses who deal with clients. And it's very difficult when a client has a big problem and they've paid a lot of money for advice with a particular lawyer, for example, and then they're told, oh, I'm sorry, I'm now disappearing, and we're going to get someone else to stand in for an uncertain period of time. We're not going to know how long that period of time is going to be. That there are sort of bespoke businesses that really suffer with women who take maternity leave. So there isn't one size fits all, but overriding all that is it's a question of economics. The money isn't there.
Let's talk about the economics, and actually not the amount of women that leave work or go part-time after their baby or after they've done their maternity pay is staggering and actually costs the economy, they estimate, £29 billion a year. Well, that would definitely fill the £22 billion Labour accuses of the Conservatives leaving behind. So actually, it would be economically smart for this to increase.
If that's the real reason why. Do women, when they have children, do a lot of women not actually think, actually, I just want to be at home with my kids now. I don't really want to go back to work.
I think for most people it's a financial thing.
I think it's a financial thing. I mean, back in the day, you know, you got married, then you had children, and if you had a career, you just stopped having that career.
Yeah.
You know, that's just not right. And the thing is, teachers are so important, and because they've at the end of the line now, as I say, with bad parenting or, you know, whatever happens, they are under such pressure, but they are so important because they are the future generations are in their hands. Education is the most important thing. It really is. So we need continuity and a way for people to be continuously in work if they want to be.
You brought up the bad parenting issue before the break, and I did think that was a really interesting thing to pick up on, only because I think there'll be a lot of people screaming at the TV, yes, we're not toilet training children before they go to school because we don't have the family life that we used to. We don't have one designated person at home making sure that these children are ready, school ready when it comes to being 4 or 5. So actually, maybe we don't need women or men back at work. Maybe we need somebody at home raising the family the way we did in the 70s.
Well, then why not the man?
Oh, that's why I said somebody, I mean, man or women. I don't know. That might be an argument.
And to answer your question, which was probably a rhetorical question, I suspect that the man probably earns, in the main, more money than the woman. And that's a question of economics, and I know people won't necessarily like that, but I suspect that's the reality. If you speak to your HMRC, they'll confirm that that is so.
But that would be a historically that would make women at a disadvantage from the get-go because of historical inequalities.
Women are disadvantaged. Women are disadvantaged. You cannot get round the fact that there's women who, like you, are pregnant and bear the child for 9 months, and then presumably, however you know, supportive your other half is, the childcare will mostly fall into your hands in some way.
But presumably you'll make an agreement. The husband and wife or partner or whatever your status, you'll make an agreement. You go back to work, I'll go back to work. This is how we'll do it. You sort it out between the two.
And I think you can look into splitting your maternity leave or sharing it. But we're talking about increasing the amount of maternity pay you get. Do give us a call with your thoughts, 0207 862 2222. Danica from Glamorgan, what do you think about what some head teachers are doing? They're increasing maternity pay for teachers in order to encourage women into the industry.
Yeah, so I think all women would agree that increasing maternity pay would be such a privilege to have, because it is difficult when you are off, or whether you take 9 months or the full year. It's really difficult to, you know, sustain the lifestyle that you were before, or even just making ends meet while you are off on those 9 months or a year. But I think the real difficulty with maintaining women going back to work is the childcare costs once you return back to work. So I'm a registered nurse for the NHS, and my childcare costs, thankfully, were quite minimal because I had grandparents to look after my daughter once I returned back to work. But I know some families aren't so lucky to have family around that can look after their children for them. And they're looking at £1,200 a month just for childcare, which doesn't make it sustainable or even cost effective for them to return back to work. It's just not feasible. So I think the childcare costs would make much more of a difference rather than the maternity pay.
Well, and Danica, actually, I'm also thinking for you as a nurse who works shift work. Now, most nurseries that I have spoken to will only do a sort of 7 till 6 will be their longest spell, but they'll do kind of standard working hours. How do you operate as a nurse? What do you and your colleagues do when it comes to childcare in order to cover if you're working evening shifts or anything else?
So I know quite a few friends who might work nights, which means that their children have to stay out overnight at grandparents' house. I thankfully work 9 till 5, so mine's not too bad, but that does mean that I need childcare then for every day of the working week. So, you know, it is difficult to
get the right balance with that then. Because, like you said, there is no childcare option that is after hours, after 6 p.m.
There might be sort of childcare, but yeah, grandparents are, I think, the best option if you're looking financially. Danica, thank you very much for bringing childcare up. Obviously, an absolutely massive issue. But when we're looking at businesses, just trying to retain staff. So there's a huge amount of industries that are really struggling with staff. You've got the hospitality industry, you've got nurses, doctors, teachers, and maybe an increase in maternity would help fill those job vacancies. What do you think, Valerie? You're calling from Lancashire.
I think they'll be rubbing the hands, some of the girls, because I've got girls that live around near me that every 2 years make sure they get pregnant so they don't have to go back to work.
Do you think that they feel comfortable surviving on £180 a week or less?
They're on that, and they're on all the child family, their allowance that they get as well. And they get a big allowance while they're pregnant to buy the stuff that they need. I can't believe it. In that, I mean, I've had 5 children, and I've worked. I was back at work when they were only 2 weeks old.
Wow, I mean, that is absolutely incredible, but not a rare story. I'm going to say unfortunately, because I don't know how. Did that feel very healthy to be back at work 2 weeks after giving birth?
Well, I'm nearly 79, so I were all right.
Okay, but I don't think it's something that every woman would be able to do. I mean, I had a caesarean, I'd barely healed in 2 weeks. In fact, I definitely hadn't healed in 2 weeks. But do you believe that, Nina? Do you think people are just off work on maternity, enjoying themselves?
There are people who will
abuse
the system in whatever aspect. So I'm sure there are people who do that. But basically, we should, if you want to get pregnant, move to Scandinavia. They have fabulous,
Well, don't say that. We've got declining birth rates in this country.
I know.
We need people to be having babies here.
Sweden, you get 390 days off at 80% pay. In Denmark, they cap the childcare at 30%. In Norway, it's capped at £20 a week.
Wow.
Yeah, but do you know what the tax systems are in those countries?
Fine.
Massive.
But it's worth
We're
it.
We're clearly going to continue this conversation after the show. Valerie, thanks for your call. Huge thank you to Nick and Nina for being such a brilliant panel. Thank you for all your calls and messages. Jeremy will be here at 9:15 tomorrow morning. I'm going to be back shortly after that, same time, same place. But until then, I hope you have a really lovely afternoon. Thank you very much.